All right, sorry for the delay. Um, Welcome. I'm Christie Berrier, and I'm going to now slip silently off and get my presentation up. Welcome. So give me just a couple clicks. I'll let you see my desktop, and then I'll get started. All right. So you should have the view of my PowerPoint. All right. Test this out. Looks like we're on about a 20-second delay at the moment, so bear with us as we get the kinks worked out. My name is Christie Berrier, and I'm the visual arts teacher at Stevenson School of the Arts in Merritt Island, Florida. And I'm doing this webinar as part of the FAAE and FLDOE collaboration for the state art award called the Florida Arts Model Schools. It encompasses visual arts, music, theater, and dance. And at our school, we are honored to be awarded the designee of FAMS for visual art and music. And some of you may have tuned in earlier to our webinar on music in academics with our awesome teacher, Mr. William Yo. And hopefully this will continue. We've kind of set up a web page, which I will share at the end. If you provide your email address to me via my email, then I will not only send you this PowerPoint, but I will also send you a link to a resource that we are starting that has videos as well as lesson plans and other opportunities for teachers to utilize things within their classroom. But why don't we get started? So a little bit about me. I have 2 degrees, one in film and one in anthropology. And I had good plans to combine those, but I continued on to a Master of Education and fell in love with teaching. So far I have 12 years of teaching experience, 3 in media studies, and 9 in visual arts. I was awarded our district's Excellence in Visual Arts Award 2 times, the state VADS Award, which is now defunct, and currently the Florida Arts Model Schools Award. I am one of those crazy art teachers that loves to present, and I've presented at FAAE many times and nationally several times, and just enjoy sharing and learning from others in the collaborative setting. I have a desire, a lifelong love of learning for new things, putting things together. I'm constantly into a new hobby or whatnot. And I love to bring things back to students so that they can foster their own interests. So it's a little bit about me. Moving on, our schedule for this evening, we'll try to have you out in about 45 minutes. I'm really sorry I can't take questions. I have an iPad up beside me in the view mode, and for some reason I just can't get the chat function set up on this iPad or the other, the laptop that I'm using. So I do apologize, but I would be happy to answer any questions via email, and I do provide that at the end of this webinar. So without any further ado, we'll go through why art in the core classroom. This is a webinar that is geared toward an emerging art program or an underprivileged underprivileged art school. That means they have no music, art, theater, or dance, or they have just a start of one or half-time. We're going to examine the standards, both Common Core and visual art. I will go heavily into math, in integrated lessons in high school, middle, and elementary school. I will also do the same for language arts. And in science and social studies, I've been given just kind of a K through like 7th grade overview It was really difficult for me to pull high school math standards together as well as quality products, so I didn't want to give you inferior product, but I think if you see what I did for math, you'll be able to do it for science and social studies pretty easily. And at the end, I had high hopes for discussion and questions, but it looks like we're going to have to move on and kind of skip that today unless I can figure it out while I'm doing this. So why art? Why do we want to study art in a core classroom? Well, the first and foremost is to differentiate at our instruction. So if I were in a common core, if I were in a core classroom setting, this might be to accommodate for my visual learners and also to provide tactile experiences to my students. If it's in an emerging art room, then why art? Well, it's because it's very important, and all these following reasons will be the reasons why art. It promotes visual literacy. It allows students to be able to communicate differences within, examining two things and being able to intelligently output things that they like about one, or to even without putting bias in, talk intelligently about two differences. And also to find their own personal preferences so that they can become, have their own style and their own learning. It's also, why do we choose art? Because, art vocabulary is content rich and specific. For instance, when we might play outside, we would use a ball, or if we're rolling clay, we might roll it up into a ball. But we have so many words as art teachers to use. We can call it a sphere. We can squash it flat and call it a circle, and we can actually give those real world experiences to students so that they are able to make the connections to real world. Why art? Well, in definitely the K-6 setting, and we're finding farther and farther, we're learning on skill building, and the skill building is becoming more important as we see deficiencies. I like to say we need to find ways to build skills, since technology has changed how students develop. And I'll probably go over this later on, but I see a rapid growing even fine motor and grasping lack of skills in my students, and it's because they're not doing those hands-on experiences as toddlers. And I have fifth graders that can't open water bottles because they don't have that grasping ability. So that is why art. I mean, we're here to develop those skills. Art is engaging. It's doing versus absorbing. So, you hear the lecture, they want hands-on, student-centered classroom. It's really hard to find an art classroom that's not student-centered. They're always, making products and showing what they have learned through their products. Art builds confidence. It gives students that real-world experience. And then for the future, it gives experience for entrepreneurial skills and communicative confidence. Especially when teachers use artist statements or have students talk about their art and their decision making, it really does add to the whole package as developing our students as lifelong learners. If you need more resources for why art, maybe you're trying to back up a program or build a program and you need support from PTOs or administration, these are two excellent articles that you can go to kind of show the importance of learning. It does have links to quantifying, so I'm not going to talk about them or go into them, but I will share this PowerPoint with you at my emails at the end, and I would be happy to, because I will love to see your program grow. Lastly, I want to talk about why art in a case study. So Boston has started, I think it's about 8 years now, a fine arts academy, and it's based on academic rigor with fine arts. And they found out, it's a high school, most of the students that enter the high school at 9th grade really have very limited exposure to fine arts. The students that attend this, you'll read this in the article that I've posted the link to, but most of the students come from those lower income families with just limited exposure to the arts. And they found the output of this arts academy has created learners that are, not only are their test scores above state average, but 97% of these students are admitted into college. And so talk about the gift that arts gives to students to increase their academics, and just develop those skills, communicating and performing and all that. It shows how important art is throughout the curriculum. Personally, I think why art, because art builds skill, communication, and expression in a world that really is just kind of dumbing down communication. And, there's always an emoji for that. And, here, if we were in the chat, we'd probably add an emoji, but, it gives students the ability to pick their colors and to express with line and emotion in their content. And that's what art is all about. So today we're switching to standards right now. It all starts with the standards, and we want to create high quality lessons, no matter if we're in the core classroom or in the art classroom. So Florida standards, we're lucky in Florida. I know I opened this out to the art teacher pool on Facebook, so I don't know who we have watching that didn't log in or connect with us earlier, or who may be coming to watch later. But Florida has a really awesome resource called FAMS, where we can go and search our standards and pull things together. It has all of the standards from ELA and math to health, physical education, visual arts, theater, and it's sorted by grade level. You can sort it by topic. Florida ELA and math standards, we call them the LAFs and the MAFs. Essentially, they're Common Core state standards with just a few differences. They're almost verbatim the same words, but you'll see if you go to CPOMS and start looking through those standards. We also have visual arts standards. They are different standards than national art standards, but they are so closely connected. I think national standards have big ideas, and we call it something else, and our strands are different. But when you really just delve down into the standard, you find that it's nearly the same thing. They're just organized much differently. So it all starts with the standards and knowing where to go to find the information. And you'll find that there are visual art standards that are labeled ELA, that are labeled math. And I'm thinking, practical, I think second grade has divide a circle into two equal parts. And, that's the beginning of fractions. However, that's good golly, could we cut a cut circle in half in the art room? You bet, so there's many common overlaying things that we could build upon to have core teachers be teaching visual art in order to give students a new venue for expression. And also, instead of taking a test, show what you've learned by creating this, and it needs to have these kinds of requirements. Much more engaging way to show what you know than filling in a blank on a worksheet. I highly recommend that you work to prioritize your standards, be it visual arts or English language arts or math. The way I do it is I print them out and I cut them up, and then I sort by student ability. So if I have a hands-on skill building standard, I will put them all in a pile. If I have connection with history, I put those in a pile. If I have, I'm trying to think of something that would overlap with core, but I would put my standards in different piles, and some standards would lend itself to be going into more than one pile. So I make a last pile for it, and I write which other pile on the back. So if I have a standard that would go with pile 1, pile 2, and pile 3, then I would put 1, 2, and 3, and maybe it didn't have pile 4, and maybe 1, and so I would end up making a copy of the one that had different numbers on, and I would still stick it in the piles. Well, there's a reason why you want to prioritize the standards. After you put them in piles of like things, be it target population or student ability, you know, you'll find out that some standards you'll hit by covering the master standard or the priority standard. So always keep in mind when you're sorting these piles, do my students need to know this to show mastery of one of the other standards, or can it be taught through the requirements of another standard? And that's kind of how you decide prioritize standards. There's so many resources on the internet for prioritizing standards, but once you prioritize these standards, it's like it's heaven for anybody that plans lessons. And you know, it isn't a lot of upfront work, but once you do this, the benefit is that when you lesson plan, you plan with the priority standard in mind, and then the support standards will naturally be reinforced through the priority standard. So you're teaching the priority standard, but yet all the support standards are covered or they already know. And so not only are you reinforcing those support standards, you're working smarter and not harder, and it just ends up being such a blessing within your lesson plans. Moving on, so we're going to touch base with math. This is kind of interesting because I started with thinking we would do a high school and then a middle school and then a elementary lesson kind of view on the subject, but really there's some things I need to tell you up front. You know, and this is so true with English language arts also. We are teaching to a YouTube or Instagram generation where they have this attitude, why do I need to know this? I can look it up in 15 seconds, or I might know a friend that knows the answer, or I can go ask an expert. You know, what we need to show them is that real world application you cannot teach. And I think, you know, I'm thinking of Pinterest fail pictures. You know, you can always go see how somebody did it, but until you get that practical hands-on working and practice with the subject, the modeling of it, that's when you find true understanding. And we need to have that skill in order to be successful with college and have, you know, great careers, succeed as entrepreneurs, and actually be those makers of change that our upcoming society would like to become. They have to know how, and you know, it doesn't come with just watching a YouTube video all the time. It comes with hands-on and practice. And you know, we just have to show them that. So my first example is a high school, and there is an artist who is heavily involved in math. His name is Fielding Brown, and I put up parts of his artist statement for this picture and this article that I'm going to share with you. But the Lissajou figure that he sculpts, he writes equations on his computer, and then he uses his computer to find how these equations can be produced if he tweaks them in certain ways. And essentially this is how his whole group of work, his whole body of work has been created. And I not only find it beautiful, but there is a practical application. Secondary education students are able to see, you know, these really complex mathematical equations in the process, in work, in real life model. And I mean, this is what they need to be doing when they become engineers and you know, inventors. And we can show them this in the math room. We can show this with art. And so here's Fielding Brown. This is one of his three-dimensional models of the equations that we were talking about. And this one is called bicycle wreck. And I just love it. And, you know, I show this to my like 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. They don't understand the equations, but we talk about how, you know, imagine a hula hoop and it's rotating. And we see, you know, my students don't know about the equations, but they do know about, you know, foreshortening. And if I turn a hula hoop if I turn it so that I'm not looking straight at it, it's not a perfect circle anymore, it's an ellipse. And we communicate the difference between the circle and the ellipse and what we see, which is perceived, and what is actually there. And this is kind of the same dynamic. Imagine a spinning hula hoop or a spinning coin as it falls to the floor, and we see that mathematical equation come to life. Pretty great example. So these kinds of items are out there for teachers to use. Bridge Smart Art, Bridge Math Art, and Student Guide, the best math art on the web, there are two great resources, especially for higher level examples of math being utilized by professional artists, by teachers and lesson plans. And I highly recommend these two for more ideas. In middle school has its own issues. It has kids just, they're having some issues with their body. They have physical changes in their body, which requires a very big need for sleep and different nutrition. They're very self-conscious right now, and they have a humongous need for social interaction. So the art projects that we give them through math need to be really engaging, very quick. We have these devices that have made things readily accessible for kids immediately. And so the projects that we need to give to these kids are engaging, quick, and sometimes have to do with social interaction or really good practical purposes. I have found that this teacher, Matt Peroni, he's come up with a neat plan on how to do different angles within a drawing. And not only do that, but find the measurements for those. And bouncing off of this, wouldn't it be cool to do the same kind of things with perimeters and the area, computation of area. And I did list the link down at the bottom so that you can find his teaching practices, really engaging math teacher who adds art into his curriculum. So great examples there. We're going to go to intermediate now. The intermediate student is still building skills. They are the device generation, and here's that statement again where I said they are behind schedule. They're fine motor. They don't grasp. Their handwriting is, I could compare it with some of the ones who play video games a lot. If I see their handwriting, it looks almost like second grade. And so it's these kids that we need to give these experiences and this need for movement in order to build those grasping, pinching, all these skills that they are just lacking. It shows in their artwork too. So I like to think that we are shifting from traditional art, paper, cutting, and I like to try to find ways to incorporate as much of the skill building as well as math into these lessons, because we need to catch these kids up. I would take the Calavera lesson and we would change it from an oil pastel and cutting lesson into a practical application of icing cookies. So limited budgets. Let me address that real quick. I used pancake mix and they'd measure pancake mix and eggs. Sometimes you can get them donated from grocery stores, especially when you tell that you're trying to do practical. I know we have a local grocery store here that's really interested in, they'll bring kids in to do math in their grocery store. But you can also bring it to the classroom. Your cafeteria ladies are really helpful sometimes at baking things. Now, my school is hands-off food eating. So we must package and send home and leave that totally up to the family to decide if they're going to eat. But regardless, they got to take home and they got to do this in the classroom. So they not only did fractions with recipes and color mixing, because they had to learn how many parts per color, and so they would read and mix the colors based on that. Then they would also do conversions. So on some of, we worked in groups, and some of the students had to convert from one measurement to another. And of course, the skills, we worked with fine motor. For this, I utilized 2-ounce glue bottles. And the 2-ounce glue bottles held the icing. They were able to hold them in their hands, and it worked on the grasp. And, you know, you can see a difference between the student who has had practice and who hasn't, and who holds steadier. But you do see an improvement from the beginning of the cookie to the end of the cookie, and that was just a really worthwhile lesson. Now, I do want to say, as an art teacher, you have to let go of the product. You know, this is not a showpiece, and this is not certainly one that can hang on the refrigerator by any means, but you know, you take a picture of it, and not only do they have the memory, but they have that interaction and the tie to edible art, because you know, this is a career that they could go into later on in life. And so you're hitting a lot of different standards. I know the art had the career, and there was a career in the social studies aspect of our standards for this. All right, on to intermediate, another one. I know, especially with the end of paper-based tests, this was perfect for paper-based tests, because I know we had these horrible paper rulers, and sometimes, you know, it was just a disservice because our students hadn't had contact with the ruler. So I was tasked with, you know, by this January, I needed to have students familiar with rulers and where, you know, what is 0 on the ruler? Where is it? Some rulers have it at the very edge of the ruler. Some put it on a line. Is the ruler inches or metric? What's the smallest measurement? Some of them only go to 1/4 inch, and some of them divide down even smaller. And so, you know, giving them a plethora of tools to become in contact with is super important. But you can do beautiful artwork things, but it is math. So, you know, you show them that how to make a 90-degree angle by aligning the end of the ruler with 2 points on a line. And you show them how to measure out 5 inches in a snowflake. And within that, you can teach your art concepts of color and harmony. You can teach composition with this. And I probably wouldn't use this as a contest piece for the visual arts room, but it would make a beautiful background for, you know, a multimedia project. In the primary grade, we're really focused on, you know, those kids learning that basic knowledge and skill development, but they're also learning social skills. And so it's really important to give them, you know, what they need mathematically, but keep in mind that they're, you know, their hands are not yet developed, and they're learning things, and you know, they might not be as successful, and that sometimes that's demotivating to students. And so we try to give them ways to succeed. So in the elementary classroom, we're really focused on things like, especially in math, number sense, size, dividing things in halves and wholes, you know, that goes into fractions, and also symmetry. And so, you know, dice are common in my classroom, not only in the primary, but all the way up to 6th grade. So 6th grade would be considered middle school for Florida, except for our county. And 6th grade is stuck in the elementary classroom. I think we're one of 2 counties that does that. I think we see typically better test score grades, and that's why our district has decided to do that. But I use dice for many different things in the primary, in the art room. And in the little guys, it's for number sense. And it might be, we would be doing a Wayne Thiebaud picture with ice cream or bubble gum. And I would want them to draw, they would roll the die, and I would want them to draw 4 blue bubble gum and 1 red bubble gum. And so I just make things fun. And then I would ask them at the same time, it takes very little time out of your, you know, your visual art classroom. How many total is that? You know, so then they start putting the numbers together. You know, when you get clay, roll it into a 1 ball and then divide it equally into halves. And not only are they learning the math behind that, but they're also building those fine motor skills within that. We'll talk about size. I have a great picture that talks about size with a daytime and nighttime lesson. And we do kind of the same picture, a winter scene in daytime and a winter scene in nighttime. And we talk about the trunks of trees and snowflakes and the size of the green part of the evergreen tree. And we use bigger and smaller and all of those words. That also is language arts, but it's also in relation to size with the elementary math classroom. On to language arts and high school. A great way, I know my son is really into, the whole video part of school. And it is a great tool in order to check for comprehension or to show standard mastery. They are also extremely entertaining. So if you have a few minutes, just go onto YouTube and see what kids have created. The one on the left is the Odyssey. And it's some boys who have recreated the Odyssey in 5 minutes or roughly. And then, you could get a tragedy and comedy, a spoof on Romeo and Juliet. So, you get these kids into their social aspect, but they're able to show what they know in a really unique way. High school is also a great opportunity to touch on those things that we can get kids activated with. Using a piece of art such as Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother. It's such a touching photograph, but use it as a body of literature. This is visual literacy. What does this picture say? So that kids can learn critical details of a time period or of a body of work. And these are two, actually the Education Closet link. This is a phenomenal page in order for you to integrate in the classroom, and it's with all of the arts, not just visual art, but it's with music and theater and dance, and they're really thought-provoking, content-rich ways to integrate arts in a classroom to engage your learners and bring out that social character so you have great products, but it'll naturally increase your scores because kids are engaged and they're learning and they're like, oh yeah, I remember when we did that. And, they'll remember. That's what makes it great. In middle school, I went to NAEA and presented last year in Chicago, and we got to see the Van Gogh bedroom exhibit. So I knew I wanted to show and promote this. But in middle school, you can use museum resources. Use these as texts and come up with your own writing. Write an expository on Van Gogh and his bedrooms. And I don't know if you know the stories behind this. I'm assuming we have some core teachers too. But Van Gogh painted the same scene 3 different times at 3 distinct periods of his emotional turmoil. And one was actually painted with Gauguin, and one was painted for someone. And it's just really interesting to critique certain pieces of this. So it doesn't have to just be expository. It could be a critique or an argument. So really great using museum resources for ELA and, the output of their writing. In the intermediate level, elementary school visual art and ELA naturally go hand in hand, be it illustrations of stories or book studies, but there are also things like, board building. And this is a glogster that I created about one of my favorite books to use within the 5th and 6th grade arena, which is Chasing Vermeer. And not only does Chasing Vermeer, highlight the artist Vermeer, a mystery behind one of his paintings, but it talks about these 2 kids and their quirkiness, and they go to an unusual school. But the boy, he has a hobby of pentominoes, and what are pentominoes? And it's just a really neat series that kids can connect with and learn about something that they might normally not be interested in. 15th century Dutch painters is not exactly the modern day students go to, but pose it in an engaging way with a mystery, and you'll be surprised how much that they pick up. I know in our district, book illustrations, we do a book, a discovering quality literature contest within our district where kids are urged to write and publish their own books. And in our district, not only are they is the focus on writing, but it's also in the illustration and the presentation of the books. And so Adventures in Canada down here is a cover of one of these student made books in the intermediate level. And this book contest, or this book, I don't want to say contest because it's not, it's just a celebration of literature. They come together, teachers read them, they pick out things they like about it, and then it's all celebrated. It's just, it's a great way to show student a finished product with combining visual arts and ELA. However, you know, this is practical world experience. They could grow up to self-publish, and you know, we're seeing we in the last few years in this celebration, we've seen the emergence of the digital category, and I can't wait until we see that first Kindle book published, or that first iBook. And it's, you know, we might have to click a link to get to it, but instead of a thumb drive like we see now most times. But you know, that's things that we can give to students that are relatively inexpensive in the core classroom, or even in the visual art classroom. You could create comic books or graphic novels within the setting where they're actually utilizing their visual arts. One of the things that I did, best lessons I did last year, it was a total failure, but we learned so much from it, was I got this great idea that we were going to create how-to books in my classroom on paper making. And I was going to have the students self-teach themselves how to do it through YouTube videos. Well, you know, I preached at the beginning of this webinar that students often think they can learn everything from paper making. Well, you know, we do need to practice sometimes. And so, you know, we learned that maybe we research something a little bit less ambitious. And we did learn how to paper make. We didn't have the product that we thought we would at the end, but we had a blast learning. It was messy and fun, and you know, they tried out their ideas, but it was definitely hands-on, and they know how paper is made. Maybe their paper wasn't quite as successful as the professionals, which, you know, happy or sad students, but they all had fun trying. And that's one thing that I'm really extremely proud of my school, is that we foster learning through failure, that failure is not a bad thing. And you know, we had a blast learning. That's all I can say about that. Elementary and the primary, of course, it's natural. You teach a storybook, you can teach art through the storybook. I want to say one of the most fun lessons, I've never done it, but is Giraffes Can't Dance. I've seen projects with that, but the ones that I have done is, you know, this discovering quality literature. That butterfly with the feet was an entry for that discovering quality literature celebration. And, you know, I like to tie in current events. And so around Dr. Seuss' birthday, sometimes, excuse me, we'll study, you know, is that a Wocket in my pocket? No, it's a Bofa on the sofa. They have students, you know, create their own pages of books. And in the VPK or ESC classroom, you know, we give them tactile experiences that maybe they can't communicate other than, you know, telling what it looks like. And so It Looked Like Spilled Milk is a great way to get those kids that are emerging artists, you know, that don't often get products sometimes, that just kind of work with experience in order to have a product. Moving on to science. In the science classroom, you know, be it whatever grade level, there are things that you can naturally teach with art: time of day, weather, changes in matter, especially if you're using things like clay or sand or paint. Temperature. I love to talk about temperature in clay and the changes of matter with temperature, because, you know, how do you test greenware to know if it's done. Well, it's room temperature instead of colder than room temperature. And we can do an experiment with the different types of greenware. Is this one done? Is this one done? And we touch, and that experience, it can be transferred to the future when they're adults and needing to make decisions about things. You can talk about temperature within artwork, and what do things look cold or hot, or how would they be if they were hot or cold. And just jumping back real quick to math, this is one of the lessons that's not only science by showing weather, but it is also by size. You have big and small and medium. And on the right, again with math, here I have a clay lesson where I actually have them divide up. They have a ball and they divide up into halves, and then they divide one half into halves, and then they divide one half into halves, and then they divide the one half into halves, and they have to create something by all those fractions, and then they have to be able to tell what part is this, how many parts, what is this 1/8 or 1/16, and they have to tell me which part is which. You can also do coding in your classroom, and we've done coding a couple of different ways, but the easiest, most fun way, and I try to do this right before a break when the kids are just they're ready to go to break. We're ready to go to break already because we haven't had our spring break yet, but we have pipe cleaners out and beads, and I set out binary charts or Morse code charts, and they can string up their initials, or they can try. I've even gotten these 3-foot long pipe cleaners where they can put on the pony beads to make sentences. Or I asked one teacher to provide her spelling words for the week, and so that's a great way. It's not just engineering and coding, but it is also incorporating those ELA standards. Biology is another way that we can do, and so you can use plant cells. Who's to say plants are not beautiful? This lesson is a little bit more of a diagram, which you can also teach the features of writing with nonfiction writing with visual art. However, if you look at microscope slides, they're gorgeous and they create great backgrounds. And I teach kids how to, look at cells and how to create beautiful artwork that flow off the edge of the paper and look like they're just a microscope slide. But you also teach parts of animals, like thorax and legs and insects, and it's highly engaging to students. States of matter is one of my favorite things to teach, be it through clay or this. We turned our volleyball court at the school I was at before, we turned it into a sand building mecca. We had many blow up kiddie pools, and they were filled with water, and we had buckets, and we had a sand builder come in and teach us. And our culminating project was that we entered a sand building contest and build a 10-foot by 4-foot sculpture. We did happen to win second. We didn't win first, but we were the only school that created the bridge, which that was pretty spectacular. But what a memory for my students. And that week that the sand building team, the sandblasters, were practicing with that stuff outside, I took that opportunity to take the whole school outside, and we did art out there for the whole time. And sometimes art is temporary and all we get are pictures from it, but we learn how mixtures and solutions work, and we learn how how solutions and how mixtures separate. It was great fun time, and I wish I could do that here. We don't have a volleyball court here. So the next through social studies is utilizing those technology programs that kids sometimes overlook as ways to make art. Maps. I love to use Google Maps as a medium for kids to create letter collages. And kids are able to go on, kind of investigate famous areas. There's the Arc de Triomphe in France with the circle. And, it might be down the road at our school where we have, we live in a estuary, so we have lots of locks, canals in our neighborhood here in the school area. And you might find a letter or two. And so, can you spell the alphabet, or can you spell your name? Not only does this show students, north, south, east, and west, and they learn, oh, here's my neighborhood, or, here's where this is, but it also gets kids curious and familiar with the things that they're going to utilize as they're, starting to drive, or, getting from one place to another. And last, with social studies, it's obvious that culture and history is just a great way to teach art, but also to teach core curriculum through hands-on. But you've got to make it meaningful. So, when you do cave art, you give them a story to tell. And so, when we study cave art, it's, tell me the story that's going on. Is the hunter looking longingly at the prey that is too far away? What's going on in your personal mandala? How does your mandala, how is it different or similar to mandalas of Tibetan monks, or of the monks that create the mandalas in sand? And what is the difference of permanency between yours and the sand mandalas? Or, did you pick red on black pottery or black on red pottery? And what is the function of your vessel? And how was it made? And what was it made for? I love to incorporate languages in the classroom, be it visual language, or, even bringing out hieroglyphics and making students tell a story through hieroglyphics. And so our Egyptian project, I utilized the dice again there. They actually took on the role of one of the hierarchical, were they a slave? Were they an artisan or a merchant? Were they a soldier? Were they a scribe? Were they a priest? Or were they pharaoh? And so if they rolled the die, they had to assume the personality that the number represented. And then they had to create a funerary stela in order to celebrate the life of their chosen character. And so it's these experiences that you can, not only teach the visual arts, but teach the common core, teach the standards that students are really needing in their core classrooms. Well, that's about it for today. And I know that I can't take any questions, but I would love to know that you attended or viewed the recorded webinar. I want to send you the PowerPoint if you'd like, and a survey so that I can know how to improve in the future. My email is Berrier, BERRIER .Christie, CHRISTIE @brevardschools.org. And I want to thank you. I want to thank the viewers who share and go out and, please share this with teachers you feel might be interested in watching. I also want to thank FAAE and FLDOE for this experience. It's not just an award, it was supposed to be a mentorship, and I feel like giving back is really worthwhile, because when we share things, we typically learn a lot about not only our teaching style, but we learn from others when they share too. And hopefully I encourage someone to share their experiences or something that they've done too. I do know that there is a comment section after the finalized video. So if you have links and resources to share, I invite you to share those resources so that this becomes, more of a go-to. I do have a website that we are starting in order to try to help emerging art programs. And I will, if you send me your email, I will send you a link to that when it is up and running. And on that website will be these videos, both with the visual art and the music that we have created through this webinar. And I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you very much.